Why, among all creatures, did God choose the raven? A dark bird, marked by death and deemed unclean by sacred law, was the first messenger sent after the flood, before even the dove, the universal symbol of peace. In two nearly forgotten lines of the Bible, this raven appears and vanishes, leaving a mystery that intrigues and fascinates. Why was such an unlikely creature entrusted with such a crucial mission? Where did this raven go, never to return? And why do churches remain silent about this enigmatic story? Prepare yourself. What is about to be revealed may challenge everything you believe. For if God trusted the raven, perhaps he sees in you, even if the world considers you unworthy, a divine purpose only beginning to unfold. Few, in fact, contemplate the true nature of the raven. This creature shrouded in mystery, whose intelligence rivals that of higher primates, and whose presence, both in the skies and in Scripture, carries meanings that surpass mere appearance. Far beyond an ordinary bird, the raven reveals itself as an entity endowed with rare cunning, capable of feats that inspire both admiration and awe. Modern studies confirm what the ancients may have intuited. The raven is a master of logic. It not only recognizes human faces with remarkable precision, remembering both allies and adversaries for years, but also uses tools, solves puzzles, and comprehends chains of cause and effect with a clarity that astonishes scholars. It is no exaggeration to say that these black birds, often associated with omens and death, display cognitive abilities comparable to those of a human child in its early years. A raven, once offended, does not forget. It stores the offender's face in its keen memory and, if necessary, returns, not for blind vengeance, but for meticulous justice. It is as if its mind is eternally awake, observing the gestures of those who cross its path. Thus, whoever underestimates a raven does so at their own peril. But its remarkable intelligence is only one of many layers composing this creature's complexity. Across vast fields, forests, or even concrete-dominated cities, the raven adapts with mastery. Its diet is flexible. It delights in fruits, seeds, insects, and the remains of dead animals. Yes, ravens are scavengers, and it is in this trait that many ancient cultures found reasons to link them to death, mourning, and the realms beyond life. Yet such an association, though laden with dark symbolism, reveals a vital and sublime function. By consuming what life has left behind, ravens cleanse the ground of decaying flesh. They are like silent priests in a natural rite of purification. Through their involuntary work, they prevent the spread of disease and restore order to ecosystems. Even in what we deem impure, there may lie a sacred design, an invisible order permeating all creation, reminding us that nothing exists in vain in God's eyes. Furthermore, within the raven's existence lie traces of virtues that humans themselves sometimes lack. Ravens form lifelong pairs. They are faithful. They live in structured flocks with strong bonds of cooperation and mutual care. Grown offspring help feed their younger siblings, as if instinctively understanding the value of continuity, protection, and family. Could this not reflect the very essence of covenant, the communion the Creator desires among beings? It is on this foundation that we are invited to return to the sacred pages of Genesis, to the moment when the earth, submerged in chaos and the waters of judgment, begins to breathe again under divine will. In chapter 8, verses 6 and 7, we read, "At the end of 40 days, Noah opened the window of the ark that he had made and sent out a raven, which went out to and fro until the waters were dried up from the earth." This brief passage, often read hastily, holds a profound mystery. It is said that the raven was sent, that it went out to and fro, but then it disappears from the text. The narrative never mentions it again, as if its mission had been silent, solitary, and definitive. Why did Noah, a righteous man guided by the Spirit of God, choose the raven as the first messenger to survey the renewed world? Why not the dove, the one so often appearing in our hymns and children's illustrations, carrying an olive branch in its beak? The raven, however, was the pioneer, the first winged being to witness the earth after judgment. And its disappearance is no accident. It is as if the biblical text provokes us, calling us to meditation. What does this absence mean? What message does the silence of the raven carry? In popular tradition, the dove was exalted. It returned to the ark, carrying a sign of hope and rebirth. The raven, however, by its nature associated with death, was left aside, forgotten in depictions, excluded from lessons. But the sacred text does not forget. It was there. It was first. And perhaps precisely for this reason, its role is so profound, so laden with symbols that resist the simplicity of human explanations. Some interpreters suggest that the raven found food among the corpses still floating in the receding waters. With its adaptable diet, it would not need to return. The post-flood world, still covered in death, was sufficient for its survival. Yet this explanation, while plausible, seems incomplete. After all, why would the Spirit of God inspire Noah to choose this very creature as the first to leave the ark? We might see in this gesture a symbolic foreshadowing. The raven, associated with death, is sent first into the devastated world, a world still marked by judgment. It is as if God allowed the bird of the night to traverse the silent fields of destruction, announcing the end of an era. As it is written in Genesis 6:12, "And God saw the earth, and behold, it was corrupt, for all flesh had corrupted his way upon the earth." The mission of the raven, therefore, is not merely practical, it is prophetic. It flies over the remnants of a condemned world, like a messenger of a judgment already fulfilled. It does not need to return. Its destiny lies among the echoes of what was destroyed, as a herald of the end. The dove, in its serene and silent appearance, carrying in its beak a freshly plucked olive branch, emerges as a symbol of hope, reconciliation, and a new covenant between God and humanity. It is the one who returns to the ark, announcing that the waters of judgment have receded, and that the earth, once submerged under divine justice, is now ready for a new beginning. The dove carries more than a branch. It carries a message, a promise, a new covenant. Thus, placed side by side with the raven, the contrast becomes inevitable. The raven represents the moment of devastation, the transition between condemnation and redemption. The dove announces restoration, the possibility of life after judgment. Two birds, two distinct moments. The end on the wings of the raven, the new beginning on the wings of the dove. Both fly within the grand drama of humanity before God, and each, in its own way, carries a fragment of divine revelation. A subtle detail, often overlooked, emerges as a key to interpretation. The sacred text states that the raven went out to and fro. It does not say that it returned to its place in the ark, nor does it affirm that it departed forever. This ambiguous expression has intrigued scholars for centuries. Some interpret that the raven remained nearby, perhaps circling over the ark's roof, perching on emerging branches, or even floating among the debris of the former civilization. Its absence from the interior of the ark may suggest that it chose not to return, not out of disobedience, but because it found its place amid the destruction. It adapted to the landscape of judgment. Its purpose kept it among the corpses floating in the waters, not as a rebel, but as a servant on a silent mission. Others see in this the evidence that the raven, in going back and forth, faithfully fulfilled its role. Perhaps it scouted the land, checking if there was already a safe place. Its lack of a definitive return may not signify abandonment, but transition. The very idea that it continued moving between the ark and the outside world suggests a kind of mediation, a bridge between what was and what will come. A bird sent not merely to survey the earth, but to represent, through its own existence, the tensions between death and life, judgment and mercy. Regardless of the interpretation one adopts, one truth remains unshakable. The raven, with its peculiar nature, fulfilled a determined mission within the grand divine plan. While the dove would come to symbolize renewal and the breath of peace, the raven was the first to behold the landscape of a judged world. It was the first to witness the effects of God's wrath, and in a sense, the first to leave the ark. Both birds, with their striking differences, were instruments in the Creator's hands. Both flew with sacred purpose. And here is a lesson that transcends time, a revelation that touches the heart of anyone who reflects. Every creature, every person, every existence carries with it a unique role in the tapestry of providence. Some are called to be like the dove, messengers of healing, bearers of peace, heralds of new beginnings. Others, like the raven, face darker realities, overflowing from the silence of the fields of judgment, and walk among the ruins of the fallen, reminding us that there is beauty even in what the world rejects. Both are necessary, both are chosen, both are under the dominion of the same sovereign hand that with absolute perfection sketches the script of all things. And if the raven is often ignored in our illustrations of the ark, it is because it challenges our inclination for happy endings and peaceful imagery. The figure of the raven confronts, provokes, and questions. It does not fit into the soft frames of children's pictures. It belongs to the realm of tragedy, purification, and the cost of sin. But it is precisely for this reason that its presence is so valuable. It is a living reminder that before peace, there is judgment. Before renewal, there is confrontation. Before the olive tree, there is death. And the raven, with its black wings, flies over this threshold with silent dignity. And if there were still doubts about the spiritual significance of this creature, Scripture carries us further to another time, another generation, where the raven reappears, not as a symbol of destruction, but as an instrument of providence. Centuries after the flood, during the days of the kings of Israel, the biblical figure of Elijah, the Tishbite prophet, emerges, sent by God to confront the wicked king Ahab and his wife Jezebel. This royal couple had led the people into idolatry, corrupting Israel's faith with pagan gods. Elijah, as the solitary voice of truth, rose with courage, declaring the drought that would come as divine punishment. But in challenging the throne, Elijah also drew the crown's wrath upon himself. Pursued and threatened with death, the prophet had to flee. And it is in this context that one of the most moving scenes of divine providence unfolds. In 1 Kings 17:4-6, God tells Elijah, "Hide yourself by the brook Cherith, that is before the Jordan. You shall drink from the brook, and I have commanded the ravens to feed you there." Yes, ravens, those same birds regarded as unclean according to the law, those same creatures no one considered worthy of any sacred role. They were chosen by God as agents of sustenance, as bearers of life. Day after day, morning and evening, the ravens brought Elijah bread and meat. In the desert, among shadows and twisted branches, an invisible table was set for the prophet, and the servants of the feast were the least expected. The scene, when contemplated with reverence, leaves one speechless. Elijah, alone by the brook, hidden from the world, trusting solely in the word of the Lord, witnesses the heavens open and the ravens, obedient to the divine command, descend toward the earth, carrying in their beaks the sustenance sent directly from the heavenly throne. The bread was not ordinary, the meat was not random, everything was provided with precision. As celestial messengers, the ravens fulfilled the command of the one who governs even the winds and the stars. What makes this episode even more powerful is the theological paradox it carries. The law of Moses itself, in Leviticus 11:15, declares that the raven is an unclean bird. It should not be eaten. It could not be offered in sacrifice. Yet God chooses it to feed one of his greatest prophets. The message is clear. The Lord is not limited by human categories of purity or acceptance. He is not bound by our moral or religious hierarchies. God is free to use whatever he wishes, however he wishes, whenever he wishes. And often, he chooses the improbable, the rejected, the forgotten. Thus, the raven reappears in the sacred narrative, not as a messenger of judgment, but as a vehicle of grace. It transforms before our eyes. What once represented death now delivers life. What once moved among the remnants of creation now participates in the maintenance of the divine plan. This transformation is not merely symbolic, it is profoundly spiritual. It teaches us that God sees beyond appearances, that He works through means man would despise, and that often the miracle comes flying on the wings of what we once deemed unworthy. Many interpreters of Scripture, contemplating the singular scene of the ravens feeding Elijah, perceive a powerful lesson of humility and trust. This is not merely a miracle involving physical sustenance, but a profound message that spans centuries and challenges the human heart. God can use whatever He wills, however He wills, even that which man despises. What appears impure, unworthy, or inadequate to human eyes in the hands of the Almighty becomes an instrument of redemption, a channel of provision, a messenger of the heavenly will. The ravens, creatures that do not understand the complexities of the law, that do not attend temples or offer worship with words, obeyed the Creator's voice immediately. They fulfilled their mission with precision, without murmur or deviation. What a contrast with human beings, often reluctant before the divine will, conditioning their obedience on logic or personal comfort. Contemplating the silent faithfulness of these winged beings leads us to reconsider our own judgments and recognize that often God's wisdom manifests exactly where we least expect it. The story of Elijah and the ravens invites a posture of reverence before the sovereignty of the Lord, a sovereignty that bows to no human criterion but operates according to eternal purposes, often incomprehensible. Like clay in the hands of the potter, we too must yield to God's will, even when it is revealed through means we deem inappropriate. It is here that the narrative becomes universal. If God can use ravens to feed a prophet, then no one, absolutely no one, is beyond the reach of His transformative grace. Returning now to the beginning of this symbolic journey, we revisit the moment when the raven is released from the ark. It flies, disappearing from the direct narrative, yet it continues to hover over the waters of theology and spirituality as a figure that resists full comprehension. Perhaps its absence does not indicate rejection or forgetfulness, but fulfillment. Its silent departure may have marked the beginning of a new mission, not merely of exploration, but of restoration. While the dove returns with the olive branch, celebrated as a symbol of peace, the raven moves onward, invisible but active, renewing its species, finding dry land, fulfilling a role equally vital, though hidden from human eyes. Thus, a pattern emerges that transcends isolated episodes. Whenever the raven appears in Scripture, it is associated with moments of rupture and transition. In Genesis, it flies over a world newly purified by the waters of judgment, signaling, even without words, that the old has passed and the new is about to flourish. In 1 Kings, it appears at the threshold of Israel's spiritual transformation, sustaining the prophet who would later call down fire from heaven and confront idolatry in its most intense form. The raven is there, in the margins of God's great movements in history, not as a visible protagonist, but as a silent symbol of transition and providence. One might ask, is this mere coincidence? Or do these recurring appearances signal a deeper intention on the part of the Spirit who inspired Scripture? Could the raven be an archetypal figure of what God desires to reveal about His ways of working, a way that defies human standards, subverts expectations, and redefines the impure, the despised, and the overlooked? Throughout the ages, numerous theologians have recognized in the raven this transformative role. It is the improbable that becomes necessary. The bird associated with death, carrion, and mourning becomes, in critical contexts, a messenger of life. God, who could have chosen doves, eagles, or any other creatures to feed Elijah, chose the ravens. This is no random detail. It is a proclamation. For my thoughts are not your thoughts, neither are your ways my ways, declares the Lord. Isaiah 55:8. These words echo like a soft thunder in the consciousness of those seeking to understand divine action. God does not see as man sees. Where man perceives failure, the Lord sees fertility. Where human eyes see only impurity, God discerns potential for revelation. The choice of ravens, both to scout the land after the flood and to sustain the prophet in the desert, is no accident. It is pedagogical, theological, spiritual. And if this is true for birds, how much more for people? How often do we judge those around us prematurely, based solely on appearances, behaviors, or reputations? How often do we consider ourselves unworthy, forgetting that God's criteria are not the same as man's? The story of the raven is an invitation to a transformation of vision, a call to see with the eyes of heaven. The difficult neighbor, the restless child, the co-worker whom many avoid, all may be shaped by God for roles we do not yet understand. Just as the ravens, once seen as symbols of impurity, became servants of divine provision at the appointed time, the most unlikely people can also become channels of blessing and instruments of transformation. The raven ultimately teaches us that God writes grand stories with simple creatures. He performs wonders through the unexpected, and behind every detail, even a black bird flying silently over waters of judgment or skies of scarcity, there is a profound design, a message for those with attentive ears and willing hearts. This narrative offers practical and eternal lessons that transcend the context of Scripture and speak directly to the challenges of our existence. Here are some of them. First lesson: the mission beyond the ark. The raven, by not returning to the safety of the ark, teaches us that not every calling culminates in a return to comfort. Sometimes, the divine call requires that we remain outside, facing the storms of a transforming world. How often do we cling to our ark, whether a stable job, a secure relationship, or a welcoming community, fearing the unknown? The raven challenges us to embrace the mission God has entrusted to us, even if it leads us beyond our comfort zone, where true transformation occurs. Second lesson: the value of undervalued tasks. The raven's scavenging nature, though rejected by many, fulfills an indispensable role, purifying the environment and preventing the spread of disease. Likewise, tasks society considers humble, such as the work of sanitation workers, cleaners, or waste collectors, are essential for the common good. Scripture reinforces this truth in 1 Corinthians 12:22. On the contrary, the parts of the body that seem to be weaker are indispensable. We are called to honor all vocations, recognizing that even the seemingly insignificant has a purpose in God's plan. Third lesson: resilience as a reflection of providence. Ravens are creatures of remarkable adaptability, capable of thriving in hostile environments, from arid deserts to icy mountains. In a constantly changing world, their resilience inspires us to remain steadfast in our identity, adapting to circumstances without compromising the values that define us. Like the raven, we are called to face adversity with courage, trusting that God equips us to fulfill our purpose. Fourth lesson: abandonment as a prelude to new beginnings. The raven's departure from the ark, which at first glance may seem like abandonment, actually marks the start of a new chapter in the story of creation. How often in our lives do we interpret losses of people, opportunities, or even the sense of God's presence as an ending? Jeremiah 29:11 reminds us, "For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans to prosper you and not to harm you, plans to give you a hope and a future." What seems like an ending may, from God's perspective, be the prelude to a new beginning. When we view the story of the raven in this light, we realize it transcends the role of a mere detail in Scripture. It invites us to see God's hand at work in the most unexpected circumstances, using the improbable to reveal His glory. The raven, with its dark plumage and ambiguous reputation, becomes a symbol of divine sovereignty, transforming the ordinary into the extraordinary and the despised into the essential. The truth that echoes through the ages is this: in God's kingdom, nothing is insignificant. Even the raven, a creature often despised by men, is elevated to the status of a divine instrument, playing a crucial role in the story of redemption. What the world considers small or unworthy, the Lord transforms into a channel of His glory, revealing that in His purposes, every detail carries eternal significance. Consider for a moment your own journey. Have you ever felt like the raven, someone undervalued by the world, whose voice seems silenced, or whose actions go unnoticed? Perhaps you know someone like that, a person who in human eyes seems unlikely, but in God's perspective carries a unique mission. Scripture teaches us that God chooses the weak to confound the strong, as it is written in 1 Corinthians 1:27. But God chose the foolish things of the world to shame the wise. God chose the weak things of the world to shame the strong. Reflect. What if, in your apparent insignificance, you are being shaped for a greater purpose? The story of the raven invites us to contemplate God's sovereignty, which operates through the improbable to manifest His will. Just as the ravens fed Elijah in the desert and explored the post-flood world, we are called to recognize that each of us, with our weaknesses and peculiarities, can be an instrument in the Creator's hands. This truth challenges us to look with new eyes at those around us, seeing in them the potential to reflect divine glory. Moreover, the narrative of the raven reminds us that God's ways transcend our expectations. He not only uses the improbable, but does so in ways that defy human logic. Like the ravens, which flew in obedience to the divine call, we are invited to trust that even in the most unexpected circumstances, God is writing a story of redemption. This assurance compels us to remain faithful, embrace our mission, and believe that, with God, even ravens become messengers of life. As we continue to meditate on these mysteries, we are invited to discern other truths hidden within Scripture. The seemingly small details of the Bible, a bird, a mission, a moment of transition, reveal profound lessons that resonate through the centuries. If you believe this, comment, "God provides for those who trust in Him." Don't forget to leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and activate the notification bell so you won't miss the next content. May God bless you and see you soon.